Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the People's Choice Podcast. And if you're new to the show, welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm really excited to have you check out this podcast. Hopefully, you check out some past episodes. And speaking of exciting, I'm really excited about this guest I got here. I've heard so much about him. And big shout out to Isaac Ward for all my peeps that know him. He was on the podcast not too long ago, and he mentioned this man right here. And I've heard of him for a while. We had a lot of the same mutual friends, and I'm just so blown away with his talent, his voice, his grind. I mean, we're going to go into his new single. We're going to go into just him, starting off in music, growing up in Sanford. I'm so excited to have John Norris here. Welcome to the People's Choice Podcast.
The devil's coming after your soul. Don't give up, don't be scared, 'cause brother, I've been there. Can you feel it? Change is coming, someone's working on a plan. There's a reason for your suffering. Hold on just as long as you can, 'cause when you're down to nothing, God's up to something.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be on the People's Choice podcast.
Yes, thank you. I mean, the honor, like I said, is truly mine. And I'm just so excited to have you, man. I was listening to your music, and man, you are so talented. I mean, I've been listening to it for really since me and I was, talking. I heard you before like that, but really was listening to a lot of your singles, especially your new one, "God's Up to Something." So I was just like, man, this guy's good, and the music you make is so like the quality of it is so awesome, man. So I just want to give you your flowers, man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
No problem. So I always love starting off my interviews from really the beginning of, people growing up in their hometown and stuff. And you growing up in Sanford, if I'm not mistaken, right?
So I actually grew up just south of Sanford. It's called Olivia. It's got the Sanford mailing address, but yeah, Olivia is my hometown, and born and raised there. And that's all I knew until I was 18 and when I moved out of my parents' house.
Awesome. And big shout out to Olivia, actually, big friend and supporter of the show, Derek Murchison. He has the Off the Porch podcast. He's from Olivia as well. And he's been on here a couple times from my other show that I have. So that's awesome. Olivia, shout out to Olivia. What was it like growing up there?
Well, I mean, I loved growing up there. I had friends right down the street. And, it was when I was younger, it was not very busy on the road, so you can ride bikes and all that stuff down the street and stuff like that. And then we became big town in Olivia when we got a thrift store. We always had a post office and a little gas station there in Olivia, and then we got really big time when we had a bait shop. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I grew up on a little cattle farm there, and my family growing up, we've always been more of the financial lower end of the world, and so we always rented our whole lives, and so we rented on the cattle farm, and so being able to help the landlord with things like that, it was a nice experience.
That's awesome, and yeah, again, shout out to Olivia. My boy Derek, we call it Murchison University. He lives off like Murchison Road, and he's like, you coming down to Murchison University? Because he always got stories for days. He's older than me too, so I look to him like a big brother, where he always like got like stories and like life advice. So shout out to Olivia. That's awesome, man.
Absolutely.
So, what is the earliest memory of music for you, where you're just really falling in love and just captivated by it?
Well, I mean, so I grew up in church. My dad's a pastor. And so as one of my earliest memories is singing with the family. And I always got asked in like kindergarten and first grade and second grade to sing the cleanup song. I've always been a singing kid. And so we sang as a quartet as a family until my voice dropped and I got kicked out because there's too many baritones. But yeah, I mean, it started since a young kid in church.
Awesome. And I was reading up on you. You actually taught yourself to play the guitar at the age of 10, watching like YouTube videos and also just playing with family and friends. That's really, really big. Did you know at the age of 10 that that's where like you just wanted to pursue music and go after the music career? Did it happen a little later on?
Well, I knew that music was a dream of mine. Like one of my first concerts that I went to as a kid, I knew that that was what I wanted, the position I wanted to be in. But as a kid, you know, you see it more as a dream than a goal, because it's the mindset you have as a kid is a dream. But once I hit like, 14 years old, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to pursue this. And that's when I started songwriting and things like that.
Awesome. What was that the first concert you went to? Just curious.
Oh shoot. I think that was Casting Crowns.
Okay.
You ever heard of Casting Crowns? It's a
Yeah.
contemporary Christian band, and somebody had bought me and my family tickets to go see them, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely going to be part of that."
That's
And
awesome.
I saw my first country concert. Oh shoot, I was like 17 when I first saw my first country concert, but I was raised up on country too, so like it was,
Mhm.
so it was cool.
That's awesome. I'll put their picture in the video for my peeps to reference them. That's so cool. And I was also reading up on you when you mentioned being 14, you started to write music. That you was actually dealing with a hard time in your life at that moment, where you started to express yourself through writing your music. What exactly was you going through, if you don't mind sharing with me in the world?
Well, so my dad's a pastor, but my mom is disabled. She was like 19 or 18 years old when she had a car accident. She got a brainstem hemorrhage, and so she has motor skill impairments, and it also causes like chemical imbalances in her brain. So she's, emotionally throughout my whole life, and they've got her more over on a regiment now to keep her on an even playing field. But she's always been kind of all over the place. And my mom was in a nursing home for a little bit of my life, and so the disability with my mom, and then my dad's, as a pastor and a shepherd's taking care of other people as well, and also trying to take care of us and being Mr. Mom too. So he had a lot of roles on top of him. And then on top of that, I wasn't the most popular kid in like middle school and beginning of high school, because I was a bigger kid, and I was pretty awkward because I'd spent all my time in music, and so I was pretty bullied, and so I was dealing with depression and things like that, and a couple losses that were real close to me, and just turned right into music.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that at such a early age, man. That's rough. And big shout out to your father, man, for being, of course, a pastor and helping out many people, and also dealing with everything that he had to deal with, at home as
Yeah,
well. So, man,
I wouldn't be who I am without my mom. My mom is the sweetest person in the world, and I wouldn't be who I am without her. I also wouldn't be who
definitely.
I am without my dad. And yeah, they've taught me a lot of things, and I think it's that perseverance that got me through. I ended up, the role started changing when I got older, and
Mhm.
I really started thinking about my physical shape. I really started thinking about, like, look, people are going to have to accept me for who I am, and no
Mhm.
matter what I look like, no matter what, just got to be confident in my own skin. And so that's kind of the transition that happened around like freshman sophomore year. Life took a total different turn on life, and I made this decision. Like depression and all that, they totally left my life when I made this decision, was to either let life make me bitter or let it make me better. And so I decided, look, I ain't got time for this in my life, and I'm gonna just move forward and influence people who, I didn't have the worst situation in life. There's people that's got it much worse than I got it, and there's people that's got it better than me, but they also have other battles in their lives, So if I could take my situation and influence somebody else's life through music, I'm gonna do it.
Definitely, and you definitely have, man. I mean, like I said, I was listening to your music, and it just the way you deliver it, man. It's just like so impactful. Where it's like, my boy Isaac would say, like, yeah, he's been through something, man. Like, where it's like, it's just different, when someone like, when they're delivering like their song or their music, and when like what I'm talking about, like you just can't feel it, but then when someone gets true to their heart, they've been through it and they really just
Yeah,
want to touch someone, it's like, man, like I could feel that. I feel him through this song, through
yeah,
the radio waves, or through this
yeah,
music. So
yeah. Well, and that's what you need to get with music is authenticity. Some of the most people, like most famous songs that you hear, some of the most songs that really stick with you in your life are the ones that really meant something to the artist, even if it's ones that they didn't write. It's ones that came into their lives at a certain time that impacted them and it reached them from a writer, and they decided to cut it. Those kind of songs.
Definitely. Man, and speaking of that, like, who are some of your influencers, like some of your biggest influencers that you looked up to in the music industry?
Oh man. Well, I've always been like a big Josh Turner fan. Growing up, I had a tenor voice when I was younger, and so I couldn't sing Josh Turner worth a lick. But I always thought his voice was super cool. How he had a baritone voice, and then it ended up later on. I ended up being a baritone. But another one was Randy Travis, and I really was influenced by like the Crab family and the gospel world. That's what I sang a lot with my family, the Gaithers, when I was younger. Garth Brooks, I always looked up to Scotty too, Scotty McCreery, because I was a young kid watching him on American Idol, and he won, and he's from hometown, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a cross of between country and Christian, and there's all kinds of influences.
Definitely. And oh man, I remember with Sky McCreery when he won, the love and support he was getting throughout North Carolina, like it was crazy. Like, and when you said that, I just like, oh, I remember that because all the girls were just like, oh my God, Sky McCreery, it just brought back memories. I was like, oh man, like I used to have some friends at even at Western, and they'd be like, I'm tired of hearing about this guy, because the girls that they like are talking about him. It was just hilarious.
Oh yeah, he won over people's hearts. He was young, had a deep voice, and yeah, he's super talented. And I know people who know him pretty well, and they've always said that he's very genuine and kind.
Like, shout out to Scotty. And
yeah.
So let's talk about your transition when you left, your hometown and went on to the Music City in Nashville. Were you about like 18 years old, right?
Yeah. So I started driving back and forth when it was like January of 2017 when I started going back and forth. It might have been like November of 2016. It was just right as I turned 18. Mm-hmm. And so I decided, there's something that I reached kind of like my peak here when it came to like what I was learning. And I knew as an artist, you always have to continue to learn. And, I always watched all kind of artists and everything on YouTube, that kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? There's a songwriter here that had pretty good success in Sanford who wrote Hurricane for Luke Combs. And it was his first #1 hit. And I was like, well, shoot, if he can do it, I can do it too. And so I went out there and not knowing what to do, just walking around, meeting all kind of people. I kind of knew somebody who moved out there from here. And I called her up and I said, hey, is there anything that you can kind of show me around, that kind of thing? And so my first night in Nashville, I played on a stage with Rascal Flatts drummer, Jim Riley. I played on the stage with Toby Keith's bass player, Dean Cook. Like literally my first night playing with all these guys, and even Jason Sheff, the lead singer of Chicago, played bass that night too. And so it was like really cool, just right off the get. It was just a cool experience. And it wasn't long after that I was rubbing shoulders with people and writing. And it's been that way ever since, going back and forth for a week at a time every month, just writing and performing. And I'm even now a demo singer as well, so I put my voice on other people's songs that they're pitching to other artists. So
that is so cool, man, and big pause for you, man, for real. Like that is awesome, man. Like, man, because I was gonna ask, was it like a real big culture shock going to Nashville? I put little clips with Nashville in the episode I had with Isaac, because like it's just so huge, like some of those skyscrapers in the city, but then it's like he said it was like kind of like it wasn't too bad. Like it was just.
I'll put it to you like this.
Yeah.
So
what was your experience?
I didn't really experience Raleigh much either growing up. Like I never really went to Raleigh. I think I went to the mall once or twice in my life. And so like it was a huge culture shock. One-way roads. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you probably 5 times I ended up turning down the wrong road and realizing, oh crap, I'm going the wrong way. But the thing about Nashville too, it's a big city. There's it's continuously growing. It's still growing by a major amount every day. The amount of people that move there, it's crazy, because not only is it a music city, but now it's a food location. So like, there's all kinds of foodies that go there and open restaurants and that kind of thing. And so, I could tell you it's a big city, but it still feels like a small town. You're there with people that's trying to do the same thing as you, that's coming from small towns a lot of the times. And so you're talking to these people and you don't feel like you're being kind of, if you've been to a bigger city, you feel like there's almost like a detachment as a community. But when you get there, I mean, it's like you already know everybody.
It's good to hear that. And I was wondering about that. Like, man, it has to be like crazy, just experience. That's so cool, man. And in your time in Nashville, going back and forth, that you actually end up working with Kenny Royster. Am I saying his name right? Royster?
Yeah. Royster. Yeah.
Yeah, Royce. And, was reading up on him and seeing the awards that he's won. And I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. And you guys worked on many tracks, just like your new single, God's Up To Something. What was it like working with Kenny?
Kenny, he is great. Very, very talented guy. His great ear. And the session musicians he has are, guys that play on all of today's hits. But the number one thing that's awesome about Kenny, and it's also probably what kind of turns some people away from him, is his honesty. He's real with you. He'll tell you, dude, you really missed that. You could really improve in this. And I'm telling you, since working with him, I've improved as an artist tremendously, just because he's honest and he's got some vocal training, like teaching skills under him, because he's learned from the greatest, the people that's taught Bruno Mars and Whitney Houston and all these kind of people. Because he's not only a Nashville guy, he lived in Los Angeles for a while and came back. But he's really great as a producer. He's stern. I mean, he has it his way when it comes to, like, if you're in a session, you need to be focused. Usually not many guests, that kind of thing. But it works for him. His method works. He's had hits come out of his studio. He's had great product come out. And so I love working with Kenny.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I was looking him up and I was like, wow, I've seen all like list of songs that he's, got, credit for. Like, just blown away. I'm like, man, I gotta ask, like that's gotta be just like kind of nerve-wracking at the same time, but also like such an honor too, and it's so cool that you have him in your corner, that you're able to work with him where he's being honest. I think that's so on, like so critical, no matter what field you're doing, is have someone who's honest with you. Like, I've had people when I started podcasting, even in the beginning, and they were like, oh, it's great. And then I had one person that was like, it's all right, but you could improve by doing this, and
those are the people that help you out the most.
Yeah, like, man. And it was crazy, like, when they were like telling me this, and I was just like, I had no idea. Like, wow, looking at it from lens and made these adjustments to where the podcast at now. And I mean, I still got room for improvement. I just reached my 2-year anniversary. So it's like, sky's the limit, but it's so critical for anyone to have that person to tell you how it is.
There's always different roles people hold in your life. There's their encouragers, but you also don't need yes people in your life. People that aren't afraid to tell you the truth. And I've been blessed to be able to have that, and not just like a dad, because my dad's the same way. He'll tell me, hey, you could really improve in this. And that's why as a kid, I was doing as good as I could as a singer, because my dad would be like, dude, you missed that. You could improve on this, that kind of thing. So yeah, yes people. If you got a bunch of yes people, if nobody's telling you no in your life, you need to kind of take a step back and see who's really in your life.
Man, amen to that. That's so true. And I wanted to ask you, what is some of the best advice that you've gotten so far in your music career?
Best advice in the music career. Well, I've gotten so much of it. But I would say probably the best advice is never live in a life of comparison. Especially, and this can go across from music into life, is if you spend your time comparing yourself to what somebody else is doing. Let's say somebody else in another podcast is more followers, that kind of thing. You can see what they're doing good, but when you start comparing yourself and almost beating yourself down way, that I wish I had this or wish I had that, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because you need to be able to accept where you're at and know where you're at so you can move forward. And whenever you live in a life of comparison, you're like kind of holding yourself bound to the position you're at, because you're like, well, I'm trying my best. Well, are you really? And so, best thing to do is That's somebody told me, he said, man, don't live in a life of comparison ever. There's so many fish in the sea when it comes to fans and everything like that. There's not competition for a playing ground. There's plenty of space for everybody to do their thing. And so just be you and do it.
That's that. Wow, that really spoke to me, man. That was great. Like I always ask my guests, like towards the end of the interview about like their favorite quote and stuff. But man, that was good. I'm still gonna ask it, but that was man. That's so true. That is so true.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Thank you. It's people have imparted it into my life.
Definitely, man. And also, I love to ask, my guests, because especially being in your line of field and have to be constantly like creative and thinking of songs and things. What are some things that you like to do on your downtime, like some hobbies or just things to relax you?
Well, in June, I just got married to my beautiful wife, and I love spending time with just spending some time with
Congrats.
her. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Outside of that, I never really got into golf until I started going into Nashville and realizing that a lot of these producers and guys, they spend a lot of time, a lot of business gets done on the golf course. I was like, I should probably learn how to play golf. And so I've gotten pretty good at it. And so I spend a little bit of time doing that as well. I enjoy playing golf, but I would say probably 95% of my life is music and the marriage, of course. But like when it comes to um, um, what's taking up time and what's constantly on my mind is music, even on the golf course.
That's so cool. And you're actually like the third person, like within the last like 2 months, who said that to me. Where a lot of this get done on the golf course. I think I'm gonna have to go to Carolina Lakes or somewhere, hit up some friends or something.
That's where I
Get
learned how
out
to
there,
play.
man. Really?
Yeah. Yep, I used YouTube to learn what I was doing wrong, and even some of my friends there that are semi golf professionals, and they kind of showed me some things, and I guess I just already had a natural knack for it and just went for it, and yeah, learned how to play at Carolina Lakes because I lived there whenever me and my brother moved out. My brother's got a college education in a certain field, and so he's doing pretty well for himself, and so we moved out into a double wide at first, and then we eventually had to move closer to his work, and so we actually moved with him into that house until I got the boot because he was getting married, and um, so we lived in Carolina Lake. So it was like I would golf probably 4 or 5 times a month. So
Yeah, I gotta get out there, man. I got a couple buddies that live out there, and I remember my boy Keith. Shout out to you, Keith, if you see this. Man, he was trying to teach me like just the form, and I was like, "How do you do this without bending your elbows? I can't." Like I just like it was just such an adjustment. I mean, I play football and wrestling. Like I never thought I'd see myself golfing. I remember just playing around with him, and he was just trying to show me, and I was like, "Man, I didn't realize how much technique is into it." So yeah, I got to go out there.
oh yeah, yeah. I like I said, I've gotten decent at it, but there's so many people that's so much better than me that I'm that guy that 50% of the time I'm probably going to slice the ball, but I can recover enough to do well. But oh yeah, it's so much skill is required for that game, and I don't have the time to invest into the skill side of it.
So let's talk about your new single that just released not that long ago. God's Up To Something. I really love it, man. Like
Thank you.
just the way the lyrics, the chorus, like it is so cool. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like where how do you get that started, and what else the world and all my peeps can expect from you in the future.
So back in 2020, I was due for my first recording session with Kenny. And I actually just went full-time music in 2019, in October of 2019. And so I'd always been doing it kind of part-time since I was 16 and could drive all over the place. But in 2020, I was full-time doing theater shows, and I was starting to sell them out too. Um, and we were doing really well. And I scheduled a recording session for July of 2020. And it happened in like, what was it, March and April, the world shut down. And so us musicians, we lost our income. I got into the point where I was setting up my business and even getting potential investors who were going to, it was in the works to invest in my business. And things shut down, the economy went flatline. And so those investors didn't step in. I've now lost my income. And I had no idea how I was going to get into the recording session at all. Broke. It wasn't going to happen. But I knew that God would make a way. So I never canceled it. I never, like, we're talking from April till July, I could have canceled. But I knew God would make a way. And so later down the line, we're coming into about 3 weeks outside the recording session. I still have not decided what I'm going to cut, because I was in the mindset of, how am I even going to get all this money together to do so? Because it's not a cheap venture at all.
Not at all.
And so I was actually over at who is now my father-in-law and mother-in-law's house, and how I got into this kind of relationship. I would come over for game night, other things like that, and they had asked me, John, you excited for the recording? And I told them, yeah, I'm excited, but they could tell there was some kind of contention in whenever I was talking about it. And so they called me a couple of days later and said, John, is there something going on? Like, are you going to be able to record? I said, well, honestly, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to. I said, at this point, I'm a couple of weeks out and I don't even have funds to do so. Well, they called me back another couple of days. They said, we want to help you do it. We're going to help you pay for it.
Man. So cool.
But in that time period, between that couple of days and that first phone call, and when they called me back and said, hey, we want to help you, I was like, you know what? I need to get to selecting songs. So I'm looking through what I've written. And there's a guy that pitched a song to me. I pitched it a couple of times, and I listened to it, and I literally had a conversation right after I got off the phone with a friend of mine. With them, the first time I said, man, I don't even know if I need to be doing this. I said, I think I'm just going to back out. Maybe it's God telling me it's not my calling. And no later than that, I get this song pitched to me. And I told him, I said, I'm down to nothing. I'm just going to quit. This song came to me, and the chorus is, when you're down to nothing, God's up to something. And I was like, literally, it was the next day that song hit me, and I was like, and it was the first outside cut I'd ever even considered cutting. And man, let me tell you, when the first time I heard it, the whole song just hit me right to the T. And it just made me weep, man. Whenever I was in that position, I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. My dream and calling, I felt like, was abandoned because of the world being shut down. And many people were in that position at that time, and no matter what their career was. And so I was like, that's the song. 2 days later, well, it might have been even a day and a half, they said, all right, we'll pay for it. And that's the first recording session I did with Kenny, was with God's Up To Something. Thank God She Did. And This Town was the first 3 songs I recorded in that session. And so, yeah, God's Up To Something, it touched my life before it even touched anybody else's. Rascal Flatts sat on it for probably five years, I think it was. It was originally recorded, the demo wise, in their direction. I'm not a tenor by any means. And so when I first heard the song, well, it touched me, but I was also like, man, this is really intimidating to be able to master, you know what I'm saying? And I had to do it in a couple of days, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it was God's Up To Something, literally came into my life in just the right time. And it did something for me, and I felt like it needed to do what it did for me for somebody else. And I wanted to give it the chance to. And I felt like God kind of pushed me in that direction of that song. And so it was with that song, and then the 2 others right off the get knew what we needed to do. And the game plan fell in place. And within weeks of the recording session, it got worked out.
Definitely, man. And it was such a great, just release, man. I remember when it releasing, and my boy Aaron was sharing it, and a couple other people, and I was giving it a listen. I'm just like, man, like, it just touches you, man. Especially with this, COVID, man, just really turned a lot of people's life upside down, and some are really just starting to kind of get out of that and recover. But man, a lot of times when you're going through so much, and your life feels like it's shaky, like you just don't know. And a lot of times people panic and stuff. But the way you laid it down in that track, though, where it was just like, that just means, God is up to something, and a lot of times, if not all the time, it's something awesome. And even though we can't see it at that moment, we will, with time. And I was just like, man, like, this is such a great song. Like, So no, let me give you another clap for that one, man. That was just such a
Oh,
great song.
thank you.
You know, and like
Thank
that,
you.
because I really enjoy it, man, for real. And I just cannot wait for you to, continue to grow in your music career and continue to make awesome music that's going to continue to touch people.
Oh, thank you, man. And that's my goal in music. And I've been asked many times, being the son of a pastor, John, why aren't you pursuing a Christian career? I said, well, I am. They said, what do you mean? You're singing country. I said, or like this person at the time was a school teacher. I said, well, why aren't you a pastor?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So you're a Christian in your field. And so my reach is to impact people's lives for the better just by listening and having a good time, bringing light into their life. Even if it's a song about a two-step dance and that kind of thing. If it's not a direct message, like God's Up To Something, it's a direct message. It's my only Christian country crossover song that I have, that I've recorded. And I mean, that's the one that you can tell, like, okay, this guy's a Christian for sure, that kind of thing. But the rest of my songs, they're fun. They're that kind of thing. And so it's meant to just reach into people's lives and give them a moment of joy or relate with them in their sadness. I've got a song I wrote called Lonely Don't Last Long. I wrote that with Aaron Cox. And he had a relationship
Aaron,
that he was,
man. Oh, yeah.
yeah, I love Aaron, man.
I've known him forever. I love Aaron, man.
Yeah, we started writing songs together when I was 16 and he was like, I think he's maybe 18. I think he's 2 years older than me. But we wrote songs together and we got really close, and I started taking him out to Nashville with me, and such a talented songwriter. I just need to get him to do it more because he's great. He's a better songwriter than I am. But he was in a relationship for like 4 years. This girl left him and he was all heartbroken. And it was literally 2 days before we go on to Nashville. We already had the trip planned. And so he still went on the trip, and we're driving the 8-hour drive back when I'd still drive the drive. And he was just all soaked up about it, worried about it. And 2 days later, we wrote the song Lonely Don't Last Long. And it's just talking about how, man, she left me and I'm here alone, but man, I hope this lonely don't last long. And even the things that he was dealing with, he's like, man, I've even looked in the Bible, how I could be a better person. And I was like, well, I mean, you can't control that. And the second verse kind of talks about that. And it's a great song. It's probably one of my sad songs, but sad songs are meant to relate with you, not, and so it's the slow heartbeat that kind of matches with yours. And so that's what they're for.
Definitely. Big shout out to Aaron, man, for real. Yeah, he has such an amazing voice too. Like, I remember some years back when his song he made for his brother went viral. Like, that was pretty cool. And still keep in contact with him a lot to this day. And I believe we're in the same fantasy football league too. So
oh, he's all about that. All about fantasy football.
So, shout out to you, brother. John, thank you so much, man. I just got a few more questions, and you've been such a great guest and really opening up and letting the people know a lot about you. So one thing I really love to ask, of course, I told you about the favorite quote because I'm a big quote guy. I just love quotes. And I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite quote or saying that you lean on during the good times or the bad times?
Well, I've referenced this to many people because many people have came to me because I try to be that guy in your life when that I'll tell you straightforward, and I'll be your friend as well. And it's what was told to me, and what I've referenced earlier was either let life make you bitter or let it make you better. That's one that I feel like it's so small, but if you make that mindset in your life will totally take a change. If you're down in the dumps, you're dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, dealing with your situation. Maybe you don't have a great situation. Know that there's maybe nobody has it worse than you do, but still there's great things in your life that you can take out of that darkness and make it into light. And so that's probably my favorite saying is, don't let life make you bitter, let it make you better.
That's awesome. I might get that tatted on me. That's a great quote. I love that, man. That is so cool. It's a great way to live, man.
Oh, well, thank you, man.
And another one I love to ask, a staple question, is gratitude. Like, I'm real big on that, especially this year. It's just been crazy for me. And that's the reason I wear this heartbreak chain like, because I've been through a lot of different heartbreaks this year, but also a lot of good too. And what keeps me grounded is gratitude. And I just like to ask my guests, what are three things or people or just that you're really grateful for in your life right now?
Wow, that's I'm I'm grateful for my dad for showing me how to be a man, um, and how to not give up even in situations. If there was many people who were in his situation when he done gave up, it would not have been the man he is to my mom. It takes a lot of a man to take care of somebody disabled and raise a family. So I would say my dad for sure. I'm very, very grateful for him. Um, and then I would say my wife. I mean, she's been my number one fan, and as a supporter, as an uplifter, um, and I'm just grateful that God gives me the ability to do so. And Lord willing, I'm going to keep going as long as I can. I told somebody in a meeting yesterday, I said, my ultimate goal, I want to be an Opry member. I want to be the guy that sells out arenas. I want to be a guy and it's not out of boastfulness, because there's people that's more talented than I am, and there's people and I'm more talented than some, but I feel like there's a calling put into my life, and you speak life into situations, and so I just want to be that guy that sets the goals of being there, and I'm going to keep going for it until I die, and so that's what I'm grateful for. Is one, my dad; two, my wife, and it's kind of reversed order. But three, God as well for not giving up on me, and for seeing me through the situations that I almost gave up on.
Amen to that, man. That's powerful, man. Definitely. And where can all my peeps and new audience find you on social media and the websites and stuff to look out for?
Yeah, so I mean, you could find me on all social medias. I'm even on Twitter, but I think I update that every like 2 years. But
I understand that, man.
But Facebook and Instagram is the same thing. At official John Norris is the way to find me on that. So you can even look up just John Norris, so JOHN Norris, like Chuck, and you can find me that way. But also, my website kind of gives you a little bit of glimpse on some of the tracks that's coming forward. We got our release God's Up To Something on iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, anywhere you can look it up. You can even Shazam it if you hear it somewhere, and that kind of thing, or use it as a TikTok sound. But yeah, I mean, check out my website. You'll find out more about me, kind of what I've talked to you about today. You got my bio. We've got great people on my team. You kind of see who's working with me on the website, and yeah, check out the songs there. And we're going to put our online purchase portal there as well for merchandise, that kind of thing. So yeah, feel free to check me out. That's just johnnorrismusic.com.
Definitely, and I'll make sure I put all that in the description and in this video. John, thank you so much. Is there any last message you want to give to all my peeps, or big shout outs to anybody that you want to give for always loving and supporting you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So shout out to Aaron for being such a great friend and songwriter. Shout out to this guy named Ray Williams. He discovered Elton John and Sonny and Cher and Cream. He's on my team. He's great. He's a huge supporter of mine. My father-in-law Adam, who is also the investor that stepped in and helped me out, and is part of my business team as well. And shout out to you, Alvin, for having me be part of it, part of this podcast. And I want to say, keep on going, keep on trotting on, and if you put in work, you'll put in good seeds, you'll reap a harvest eventually. So just keep on going.
And thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that, John. And thank you again for being a part of the People's Choice Podcast family, and much success for you, man. I mean, you're doing great things already. And sky's the limit. It won't be too long before you're packing those arenas, like you said, like where you want to be, man. Like, I can see it, man. Sky's really the limit for you, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I receive it.
Definitely. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in the People's Choice Podcast. Hope you really enjoy this episode. John Orson.
Thank you.
And you have a great one, man.
You too. Thank you, Alvin.
No problem.